The first 3 days were hard. The cubs did not trust Elena. They did not trust the station. They did not trust anything. Every loud noise made them jump. Every shadow made them growl. They slept in a pile in the corner of Elena's room, all tangled together, watching the door with wide golden eyes. Elena gave them space. She did not push. She did not force them to do anything. She just existed near them, moving slowly, speaking softly, letting them get used to her presence. She left food for them near their corner. Simple things at first. Protein bars, dried fruit, water in small cups. The cubs watched her put the food down and back away. They waited until she was on the other side of the room before they ate. The largest one always tasted the food first, checking if it was safe before letting the others have any. On the second day, Elena learned their genders. The largest was male. The middle one was female. The smallest was also female. She started thinking of names for them, even though she knew she probably should not get attached. On the third day, the smallest cub got sick. Elena woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of crying. She turned on the light and saw the smallest cub lying on her side, shaking, making terrible sounds of pain. Her silver fur was damp with sweat. Her 3 hearts were beating too fast. Elena moved toward her without thinking. The largest cub jumped up and growled, putting himself between Elena and his sick sister. His fangs were out. His 4 arms were raised. He was ready to fight, but Elena did not stop. She walked right past him, knelt down beside the smallest cub, and put her hand on the little one's forehead. "She is burning up," Elena said. "She has a fever. I need to help her. Please, let me help her." The largest cub stood there, confused. No one had ever ignored his threats before. No one had ever walked past him like he was not dangerous. He did not know what to do. Elena picked up the smallest cub and carried her to the medical bay. The little one was so light in her arms. She was whimpering, her 4 hands clutching at Elena's shirt, her golden eyes squeezed, shut in pain. "I know, baby," Elena whispered. "I know it hurts, but I am going to make it better. I promise." She worked through the night. She had no medicine for Kirith. She had no medical files on their species. She had to guess, using what she knew about mammalian biology, hoping she would not make things worse. She gave the cub fluids. She cooled her fever with wet cloths. She held her and sang to her, and told her stories in a language the cub could not understand. The other 2 cubs watched from the doorway, too scared to come closer, too worried to leave. By morning, the fever broke. The smallest cub opened her eyes and looked up at Elena's face. She made a soft sound, that purring noise that Elena had heard before. Then she pressed her face against Elena's neck and went to sleep. Something changed after that night. The cubs started following Elena around the station. Where she went, they went. When she worked in the hydroponic bay, they sat nearby and watched. When she cooked food, they stood beside her and sniffed the air. When she sat down to read, they curled up at her feet. The largest cub stopped growling at her. He still watched her carefully, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something like respect. Something like trust. Elena gave them names. The largest she called Theo. It was a name from old Earth, a name that meant gift from God. He was serious and protective and always watching out for his sisters. He reminded Elena of her own brother, who had died in the floods trying to save their neighbors. The middle one she called Sasha. She was curious and clever and always getting into things. She figured out how to open doors on the 3rd day. She figured out how to use the food dispenser on the 4th. By the 5th day, she was trying to read the labels on the equipment. The smallest she called Luna. It meant moon in the old languages. Luna was shy and gentle, and always wanted to be held. She followed Elena everywhere, reaching up with her 4 small hands, asking to be picked up. When Elena held her, she would press her face against Elena's neck and purr. "My brave little babies," Elena would say to them every night before bed. "My brave, brave little babies." She knew she should not get attached. She knew the Concorde was coming. She knew the Kirith cubs were supposed to go to military training facilities, where they would be taught to fight and kill. She knew that everything she was doing was probably against some law or regulation. But she did not care. For the first time in years, Helena felt like herself again. She felt like she had a purpose. She felt like she was doing something that mattered. These three small creatures needed her, and she needed them, and nothing else in the universe was more important than that. On the sixth day, Theo spoke his first word. Elena was making breakfast when she heard it. A rough, growling sound that was trying very hard to be something else. She turned around and saw Theo standing behind her, his golden eyes fixed on her face. "Ma," he said. Elena dropped the spoon she was holding. It clattered on the floor. She stared at Theo with her mouth open. "Ma," he said again. Then he pointed at her with one of his 4 hands. "Ma." Elena knelt down in front of him. Her eyes were filling with tears. "That is right," she whispered. "That is right, Theo. I am here. I am right here." Theo walked forward and put his arms around her neck, all 4 of them. He held on tight and pressed his face against her shoulder. "Ma," he said again, softer this time. Like he was testing the word. Like he was making sure it was real. Elena held him and cried. She cried for her children who had died. She cried for herself, for all the years she had spent alone. She cried for these 3 small creatures who had found her in the darkness and decided that she was worth trusting. Sasha and Luna came running when they heard Elena crying. They pushed their way into the hug, wrapping their arms around her and Theo, making worried sounds. "I am okay," Elena told them, laughing through her tears. "I am okay, my babies. These are happy tears. I am just so happy." They did not understand her words, but they understood her tone. They understood her warmth. They pressed closer, holding on, refusing to let go. The Concorde ship arrived 2 days later. Elena watched it descend through the gray clouds, a dark shape against the dim sky. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Behind her, the cubs huddled together, sensing her fear. She did not know what was going to happen. She did not know if she could protect them. But she knew one thing for certain. She was not going to let anyone take her children away. The moon had no name. The Galactic Concorde had simply called it Kepler 7b and marked it as low priority on their star maps. It was a frozen world of gray rocks and endless ice, where the sun appeared only as a dim orange dot in the sky. Nothing important happened here. Nothing ever would. That was exactly why Dr. Elena Vasquez had chosen it. She had been living alone on the research outpost for 11 months. Her job was simple. She studied soil samples. She monitored the small hydroponic garden that grew vegetables in the basement of the station. She sent reports to the Concorde every week, and they sent back supplies every 3 months. It was quiet work, lonely work. But Elena had learned to love the silence. Before Kepler 7b, she had lived on Earth. She had been a mother. She had been a wife. She had been happy. But the Pacific floods of 2847 had taken everything from her. The water had risen so fast. She remembered holding her daughter's hand as they climbed to the roof of their house. She remembered promising that help would come. She remembered the wave that pulled her little girl away. Elena survived. Her children did not. Her husband did not. She spent 2 years in refugee camps, then 5 years in hospitals, then 10 years trying to forget. When the Concorde offered her a job on a frozen moon at the edge of nowhere, she said yes without asking questions. Now she spent her nights drinking coffee and watching the stars through the viewport of her small station. She had made peace with her loneliness. She had accepted that her life would be quiet until the end, but the universe had other plans. On the night, everything changed. Elena was sitting in her control room, reading an old book on her tablet. The clock on the wall showed 0017 hours. Outside, the temperature was -80 degrees. The wind was howling across the frozen plains, carrying ice crystals that sparkled like diamonds under the weak starlight. Then she heard it dot at first. She thought it was the wind. The storms on Kepler 7b often made strange sounds as they moved through the rocky valleys. But this sound was different. It rose and fell in a pattern. It had rhythm. It had emotion. It was crying. Elena put down her tablet and walked to the viewport. She pressed her face against the cold glass and listened. The sound came again, louder this time. It was not mechanical. It was not the wind. It was the sound of living creatures in pain. Her computer had detected something too. A small alert flashed on her screen. A ship had crashed in the northern valley, 12 kilometers from her station. The crash had happened 6 hours ago, but the computer had only now picked up the distress signal. Elena pulled up the data. The ship was Kirith. Her blood went cold. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Kirith. They were the most feared species in known space. They stood 8 feet tall and had 4 powerful arms. Their fangs could bite through metal. Their claws could tear through armor. For 60 years, they had served as soldiers and mercenaries for the Dominion, a vast empire that controlled half the galaxy. The Kirith had destroyed entire planets. They had killed millions. They were monsters. Every protocol told Elena to stay inside. The crash could be a trap. Even if it was not a trap, approaching a Kirith ship was suicide. She should wait for the Concorde to send a patrol. She should lock her doors and hide. But the crying continued. Elena closed her eyes and listened. The sound cut through the wind like a knife. It was high-pitched and desperate. It was not the sound of adult Kirith. It was the sound of children. She thought of her daughter. She thought of the promise she had made on that rooftop, the promise that someone would always come. She thought of all the nights she had spent wishing that someone had come for her babies. Elena grabbed her thermal suit from the closet. She checked the power cells and found them at full charge. She packed a medical kit into her bag. She hesitated at the door, her hand on the release button. This was stupid. This was dangerous. This could get her killed. She opened the door and stepped into the frozen night. The walk took 2 hours. The wind pushed against her like a living thing, trying to knock her down. The ice cracked under her boots. Her suit's heating system worked hard to keep her alive, but she could still feel the cold seeping through the seams. Twice she fell and had to dig herself out of snowdrifts. 3 times she considered turning back, but the crying guided her forward. It grew louder with each step. It pulled at something deep inside her chest, something she had buried years ago. When she finally reached the crash site, she stopped and stared. The Kirith ship had broken apart on impact. Pieces of metal were scattered across the valley like fallen leaves. The main hull had cracked open, spilling cargo containers and broken machinery onto the ice. Elena could see bodies in the wreckage. Adult Kirith, still and frozen, their forearms twisted at wrong angles. But near the back of the ship, one cargo container remained intact. The crying was coming from inside. Elena approached slowly. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She reached the container and looked through the small window on its door. 3 small faces looked back at her. They were Kirith cubs. The largest was about the size of a human child of 10 years. The other 2 were smaller. They had silver fur that was matted with frost and golden eyes that glowed in the darkness. They were huddled together in the corner of the container, their forearms wrapped around each other, their small bodies shaking with fear and cold. When they saw Elena, they snarled. The largest cub pushed itself in front of the others, baring its small fangs. It was trying to protect them. It was trying to be brave. Elena looked at these children of monsters. She looked at their terrified eyes and their trembling bodies. She looked at the way they held each other, the way the big one shielded the little ones, and she saw her own children. She did not see enemies. She did not see future killers. She saw 3 scared babies who had lost everything, who were alone in the cold, who needed someone to help them. Elena sat down in the snow, right there in front of the container. She did not try to open the door. She did not try to reach for them. She just sat there, letting them see that she was not a threat, and she began to sing. It was an old song, a Portuguese lullaby that her grandmother had sung to her when she was small. The words did not matter. The cubs could not understand them anyway. What mattered was the sound, soft, gentle, safe. The cubs stopped snarling. They watched her with wide, confused eyes. No one had ever sung to them before. No one had ever sat with them in the cold and made soft sounds just to comfort them. Elena kept singing. The wind howled around them. The stars turned slowly overhead. And somewhere in that frozen valley, 3 little monsters began to listen. Elena sang until her throat hurt. She sang every lullaby she knew. Then she hummed melodies without words. Then she just made soft sounds that rose and fell like waves. The cold bit at her through her suit. Her fingers were going numb. But she did not stop. The cubs watched her the entire time. Their golden eyes never left her face. The largest one had stopped baring its fangs, but it still stood between Elena and the smaller cubs. It was still protecting them. It was still ready to fight if it needed to. But slowly, something changed. The smallest cub moved first. It crawled out from behind its siblings and pressed its face against the window of the container. Its breath made fog on the glass. Elena could see that it was shivering badly. Its silver fur was thin, made for warm ships and heated rooms, not for frozen moons. Elena stopped singing and looked at the small cub. It looked back at her. For a long moment, they just stared at each other through the glass. Then Elena spoke. Her voice was soft and gentle, the same voice she had used with her own children long ago. "Hello, little one," she said. "Are you cold? I am cold too. It is very cold out here." The cub could not understand her words. Kirith Young were not in any translation database, but it seemed to understand her tone. Its ears moved forward, listening. "I am not going to hurt you," Elena continued. "I know you are scared. I know you do not know me, but I want to help. Will you let me help?" The cub made a small sound. It was not a snarl or a growl. It was something softer, something almost like a question. Elena reached out and touched the door of the container. She found the release button and pressed it. The door slid open with a hiss of cold air. The largest cub immediately growled and pushed forward, putting itself between Elena and the others. Its small fangs were out again. Its forearms were raised, ready to strike. Elena did not move. She did not run. She did not fight back. She simply opened her thermal blanket and held it out. "I know," she said softly. "I know you are trying to protect them. You are very brave. But you are freezing. All of you are freezing. Please, let me help." The large cub hesitated. It looked at the blanket. It looked at Elena. It looked back at its siblings, who were shaking so hard they could barely stand. Something passed between them. Some silent communication that Elena could not understand. Then the large cub slowly lowered its arms. The smallest cub moved first again. It crawled out of the container and walked toward Elena on unsteady legs. When it reached her, it stopped and looked up at her face. Elena could see now that it was very young, maybe only a few months old in Kirith years. Its golden eyes were huge and wet with tears. It did not know how to cry. Elena opened the blanket wider. The small cub climbed into her lap and pressed itself against her chest. It was lighter than she expected. Its body was trembling. She wrapped the blanket around it and held it close. "There you go," she whispered. "There you go, little one. I have you. You are safe now." The cub made a sound she had never heard before. It was low and soft, almost like a purr. Its 4 small hands gripped her suit with desperate strength, like it was afraid she would disappear if it let go. The other 2 cubs watched from the container. The middle one moved next. It was bigger than the smallest, but smaller than the largest. It walked to Elena slowly, sniffing the air, trying to decide if she was safe. When it reached her, it did not climb into her lap. Instead, it pressed itself against her side and buried its face in the blanket. That left only the largest cub. It stood alone in the container, watching Elena with careful eyes. She could see that it was fighting with itself. It wanted to come to her. It wanted to be warm. But it had been taught to be strong. It had been taught to never show weakness. "You can rest now," Elena said to it. "You do not have to be brave anymore. Not right now. Come here. Let me take care of you." The large cub's shoulders dropped. All the tension went out of its body. It walked out of the container and sat down next to Elena, not quite touching her, but close enough to feel the warmth from the blanket. Elena sat in the snow with 3 alien cubs pressed against her. The cold was getting worse. Her suit was warning her that the temperature was dropping. She needed to move. She needed to get these children somewhere warm. "Okay," she said. "Okay, little ones. We need to go now. I have a warm place. There is food there, and soft beds, but it is a long walk. Can you walk with me?" The cubs did not understand her words, but they understood when she stood up. They clung to her, unwilling to let go. Elena looked at the long path back to her station. 12 kilometers of frozen wasteland. 3 small bodies that were already weak from the cold. She could not carry all 3. But she could try. She picked up the smallest cub and held it against her chest inside her suit, next to her skin. It was so cold that she gasped when it touched her. But it needed her warmth to survive. She could feel its 3 hearts beating fast against her ribs. The other 2 cubs walked beside her. She held their hands in hers, 2 small 4-fingered hands in each of her human hands. They stumbled through the snow together, step by step, meter by meter. The walk back was the hardest thing Elena had ever done. Her suit failed twice. The heating system shut down, and she had to restart it manually while holding a dying cub against her chest. The middle cub fell 3 times, and she had to carry it on her back for the last 2 kilometers. The largest cub never complained, never slowed down, never asked for help. It just kept walking, putting 1 foot in front of the other, refusing to give up. When the lights of the outpost finally appeared through the storm, Elena was crying. Tears froze on her cheeks. Her body was screaming with exhaustion. The smallest cub had gone still against her chest, and she was terrified that it had died. She stumbled through the airlock at 0600 hours. The door closed behind her. Warm air rushed over them. Elena collapsed on the floor of the decontamination bay, too tired to move another step. The cubs collapsed with her. They curled around her body, pressing close, sharing warmth. The smallest cub stirred against her chest. It was still alive. Its hearts were still beating. Elena lay on the floor and held them. She was laughing and crying at the same time. She did not know why. She just knew that she had done something important. She had answered a cry in the darkness. She had kept a promise. Her emergency beacon had triggered automatically when she entered the airlock. Somewhere in space, a signal was flying toward the Galactic Concorde. Help was coming. Elena did not know if that was good or bad. She did not know what would happen next. But right now, in this moment, she had 3 small bodies pressed against her, 3 small hearts beating, 3 small lives that she had saved. That was enough. The Concorde ship was large and gray and filled with soldiers. Elena watched them march down the landing ramp, their weapons ready, their faces hidden behind helmets. There were 20 of them. 20 armed soldiers for 1 human woman and 3 small cubs. Behind the soldiers came Commander Gel. He was Velthari, a species that Elena had only seen in photographs. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and too many eyes. 7 of them arranged in a circle around his head, all blinking at different times. His mouth was a thin line that never smiled. His voice, when he spoke, was cold and flat. "Dr. Elena Vasquez," he said, "we received your distress signal. We came as quickly as we could." "Thank you," Elena said. She was standing in the doorway of her station, blocking the entrance. Behind her, she could hear the cubs whimpering. They could smell the soldiers. They could sense the danger. Commander Gel looked past her, his 7 eyes scanning the room behind her. "Our sensors detected 3 Kirith life signs inside your station. Is this correct?" "Yes," Elena said. 3 cubs. They survived the crash. I brought them here. You brought Kirith into your station. It was not a question. It was an accusation. They were dying, Elena said. They were freezing to death. What was I supposed to do? Leave them? Commander Gel tilted his head. His species did not have parents. They did not have families. They grew in pools of nutrients and were assigned roles by computers. The idea of risking your life for a child was strange to him. The idea of risking your life for someone else's child was impossible. You should have reported the crash and waited for us to arrive, he said. Kirith are dangerous. Even the young ones. You could have been killed. But I was not killed, Elena said. And they are not dangerous. They are children. They are scared and alone, and they need help. Commander Gel made a sound that might have been a laugh. They need to be returned to the Kirith Military Consortium. They were being transported to a training facility when the crash occurred. Their government has already filed a claim. Elena's heart stopped. A training facility? Yes. All Kirith young are raised in such facilities. They are trained to fight, to kill, to serve the Dominion. This is the way of their species. No, Elena said. The word came out harder than she meant it to. No, that is not going to happen. Commander Gel's eyes blinked in a wave around his head. I do not understand. What is not going to happen? You are not taking them. Elena stepped back and put her hand on the door control. They are staying with me? The soldiers raised their weapons. Commander Gel raised his hand to stop them. He studied Elena with all 7 of his eyes, trying to understand what he was seeing. Dr. Vasquez, he said slowly, these are Kirith. In 7 years, each of them will be capable of killing a dozen humans. They will grow fangs that can bite through metal. They will grow claws that can tear through armor. The kindest thing we can do for them, and for the galaxy, is to ensure they are properly trained and controlled. The kindest thing, Elena said, is exactly what I am doing. She pressed the button. The door slid shut between her and Commander Gel. The lock engaged with a heavy click. For a moment, there was silence. Then Commander Gel's voice came through the door, muffled but clear. Dr. Vasquez, you are making a serious mistake. Open this door. We do not want to use force. Elena turned away from the door. The cubs were standing behind her, pressed together, their golden eyes wide with fear. Theo was in front, as always, trying to protect his sisters. But his hands were shaking. He was just a child. He could not fight soldiers. Elena knelt down and opened her arms. All three cubs rushed into them. She held them close, feeling their hearts beating against her chest, feeling their four-fingered hands gripping her shirt. "It is okay," she whispered. "It is okay, my babies. I am not going to let anyone hurt you. I promise." Outside, she could hear Commander Gel giving orders. She could hear the soldiers moving around the station, looking for other ways in. She had maybe 10 minutes before they broke through. Elena carried the cubs to the communication room. She set them down and started typing on the console. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, sending messages to every news outlet, every human embassy, every social media network she could reach. She attached photographs. Pictures of the cubs sleeping in a pile. Pictures of them eating breakfast. Pictures of Luna reaching up to be held, her golden eyes full of trust. Pictures of Theo saying his first word. She wrote a message to go with the photographs. "My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I am a human researcher stationed on Kepler 7b. 8 days ago, I found 3 Kirath cubs in a crashed ship. They were freezing to death. I saved them. I have been caring for them ever since. Now the Galactic Concord wants to take them away and send them to a military training facility where they will be turned into weapons. I will not let this happen. These are not monsters. These are children. They laugh. They cry. They call me Ma. I am asking the human race to help me protect them. Please, please do not let them take my babies." She pressed send. The message went out to millions of receivers across human space. Elena did not know if anyone would care. She did not know if anyone would help. But she had to try. The door exploded inward. Soldiers rushed into the station. Their weapons pointed at Elena. She stepped in front of the cubs. Her arms spread wide, her body between them and the guns. Enough! Commander Gel pushed through the soldiers. His 7 eyes were blazing with anger. "Dr. Vasquez, you are under arrest for interfering with Concord operations. Step away from the Kirith." "No," Elena said. "This is not a request. Step away, or we will move you by force." Elena did not move. Behind her, she could hear the cubs crying. Luna was calling for her. "Ma!" The word was rough and broken, but it was unmistakable. Commander Gel stopped. His eyes fixed on Luna, on her small face wet with tears, on her forehands reaching for Elena. "What did she say?" He asked. "She called me Ma," Elena said. "She called me her mother. They all do. Because that is what I am to them. I am their mother, and I will die before I let you take them from me." Commander Gel stared at her. He stared at the cubs. He stared at the way they clung to her, the way they trusted her, the way they loved her. He did not understand, but somewhere, in the back of his mind, something stirred. Something that wondered what it would be like to be held like that, to be protected like that, to be loved like that. He pushed the feeling away. "Take them," he ordered. The soldiers moved forward. Elena closed her eyes and held the cubs tighter. Then the communication console beeped. Everyone stopped. Everyone looked. The screen was filled with messages. Thousands of them. Millions of them. They were coming from everywhere. From Earth, from Mars, from the colony worlds, from ships and stations scattered across human space. Elena, read the first message on the screen. "We are watching. Do not touch those children. The human race stands with Elena Vasquez." Commander Gel read the message too. His blue face went pale. The galaxy was watching now. and the galaxy was waiting to see what the Concorde would do. The legal battle lasted 2 years. It was the longest and most watched trial in Galactic Concorde history. Elena Vasquez versus the Galactic Concorde, the Kirith Military Consortium, and the Dominion Empire. One human woman against the most powerful forces in the galaxy. Elena lost her job in the first month. The Concorde fired her for violation of protocol. She lost her savings in the 3rd month, spent on lawyers and legal fees. She lost her home in the 6th month, when the Concorde seized her station and forced her to relocate to a refugee camp on Mars. But she never lost the cubs. Every time the Concorde tried to take them, humans stood in the way. Protesters filled the streets of 100 cities. Ships blocked transit routes. Politicians who supported the Concorde found themselves voted out of office. The message was clear. Touch the cubs and you will answer to humanity. The footage helped. Videos of Elena singing the cubs to sleep spread across the galaxy. Pictures of Theo learning to read human books. Clips of Sasha figuring out how machines worked, her 4 hands moving faster than any human could match. Recordings of Luna curled up in Elena's lap, purring, her golden eyes closed in peace. The Kirith homeworld saw the footage first. For 60 years, the Kirith had raised their young in machines. Cold metal arms instead of warm bodies. Computer voices instead of lullabies. Military discipline instead of love. The Dominion had taught them that attachment was weakness, that family was inefficient, that the only purpose of Kirith life was to serve and fight and die. But somewhere, deep inside every Kirith, there was a memory, a genetic echo of what their species had once been. Pack animals, family creatures, parents who held their children and sang to them and called them brave little babies. When the Kirith saw Elena with the cubs, something cracked inside them. Old soldiers started crying without knowing why. Young mothers touched their empty arms and felt a pain they could not name. Warriors who had destroyed entire planets found themselves watching a small human woman rock a Kirith cub to sleep, and feeling something they had never felt before. Longing. The Kirith reconciliation movement started 3 months into the trial. At first, it was just a few voices asking questions. Why do we send our young to machines? Why do we not hold them ourselves? Why have we forgotten how to love our children? The questions spread. The movement grew. By the end of the 1st year, there were protests on Kirith Prime. By the end of the 2nd year, there was revolution. The Dominion tried to stop it. They sent ships. They sent soldiers. They threatened and demanded and punished. But the Kirith would not be controlled anymore. They had seen what they could be. They had seen a human woman love their children better than they had loved their own. And they were ashamed. When the trial finally ended, the verdict surprised everyone. The Galactic Concorde ruled in Elena's favor. The cubs would stay with her. She would be recognized as their legal guardian under interspecies law. The Kirith Military Consortium would have no claim on them, but the verdict came with conditions. Elena would have to raise the cubs on a Concorde-monitored world. She would have to submit to regular inspections. She would have to prove every day that a human could raise Kirith children without turning them into weapons. That Elena agreed to every condition. She moved to a small planet called Haven, a garden world where humans and aliens lived together in peace. She built a house at the edge of a forest. She planted a garden. She created a life for herself and her children. The years passed. Theo grew tall and strong. By his 15th birthday, he stood 8 feet tall and had arms that could bend steel. But he never used his strength for violence. He became a poet and a philosopher. He wrote books about peace and understanding. He traveled to Kirith Prime and spoke to thousands of young Kirith about what it meant to be loved. Sasha became an engineer. She designed the first Kirith family housing, buildings with warm rooms and soft beds, and spaces where parents could hold their children. Her designs spread across the Kirith homeworld, replacing the cold training facilities that had existed for decades. Luna became an ambassador. She was the first Kirith to take a human surname. She called herself Luna Vasquez Kirith. She traveled the galaxy, speaking to species that feared each other, teaching them that understanding was possible, that love was possible, that anyone could be family if they chose to be. And Elena watched them grow. She watched them become adults. She watched them change the galaxy. 15 years after the trial, Elena stood at the podium of the first interspecies nurturing conference on Kirith Prime. Behind her stood her children. Towering above her now, their golden eyes shining with pride. In front of her sat thousands of beings from every species in known space. Elena looked out at the crowd and smiled. "The galaxy asked me once why I did it," she said. Her voice was older now, weathered by years, but still strong. "Why I walked into a frozen wasteland for children who could have torn me apart. Why I fought empires for creatures I had no biological connection to." She paused. She looked back at Theo, at Sasha, at Luna. They looked back at her with so much love that it made her heart ache. "I told them the truth," Elena continued. "I told them this is what humans do. We hear something crying in the dark, and we go to it. We find something small and scared and alone, and we hold it. We do not ask if it is ours. We do not ask if it is safe. We just love it, until it is not scared anymore." Luna stepped forward. She took Elena's hand in two of her own. Her claws were long and sharp, but her touch was gentle. It was always gentle. "You taught us what family means," Luna said. Her voice was deep and rough, but beautiful. "You taught us that love is not weakness. You taught us that we do not have to be what others want us to be. We can choose. We can be kind." Elena squeezed Luna's hand. Tears were running down her face, but she was smiling. "You were never monsters," she said. "You were just children who needed someone to hold them. That is all any of us are. Children who need to be held." Luna knelt down and wrapped all four of her arms around Elena. Theo and Sasha joined them, surrounding their mother with their huge bodies, protecting her the way she had once protected them. The crowd watched in silence. Many of them were crying. Many of them had never seen anything like this before. A human woman, small and old and fragile, surrounded by 3 Kirith who would die for her, who would live for her, who called her Ma. Elena closed her eyes and leaned into her children's embrace. She had found them howling in the cold. She had picked them up and called them her brave little babies. And now, 15 years later, they were the bravest people she had ever known. This was what humans do. This was why the galaxy learned to never underestimate them. Not because of their weapons or their technology or their strength, but because of their love. Their stubborn, impossible, world-changing love.